Some moments in life are so unexpected, so utterly surreal, that they leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. I never imagined I would find myself standing frozen in the doorway, my breath caught in my throat, my mind struggling to process what lay before me. It had started as an ordinary evening. The house was quiet, wrapped in the familiar stillness that settled in when everyone else was either asleep or lost in their own routines. I had spent most of the night in my room, flipping through a book while the faint hum of the television murmured in the background. Then I heard it, a noise that didn't belong. At first, I dismissed it, assuming it was just the house settling. But then it came again, subtle yet distinct, a rustling sound, a soft, almost imperceptible shift of movement. I frowned, setting my book down and straining to listen. The sound was coming from downstairs. I hesitated. My mother was away for the weekend, and my stepfather, he was supposed to be asleep. The clock on my nightstand read just past midnight. Too late for anything ordinary. A strange unease twisted in my stomach. Quietly, I slipped out of bed, my bare feet making no sound against the hardwood floor. Yet, something about the house felt different. Darker, heavier. Moving down the hallway, my breath was shallow, my senses on high alert. As I reached the staircase, the noise returned, this time clearer, a faint, muffled sound. My pulse quickened. I descended the stairs cautiously, one step at a time, gripping the banister with tense fingers. My heart pounded with every movement. The closer I got, the stronger the unease became. Something was off. Stepping onto the main floor, I paused, scanning the dimly lit space. Everything appeared normal at first. The kitchen was dark, the living room empty. But then my gaze landed on the study. The door was slightly ajar. That was unusual. My stepfather always kept it shut. Always. A ripple of dread moved through me as I crept closer, my breath hitching in my throat. A faint glow from a lamp spilled to the narrow opening, casting a sliver of light onto the hallway floor. I took another step forward, and then I heard it. A voice. Low, steady, familiar. My stepfather's voice. But he wasn't alone. I couldn't make out the other person's voice, but I could feel their presence. The air in the room was thick, charged with something I couldn't define. A lump formed in my throat as I pressed myself against the doorframe, my fingers hovering near the edge. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to go upstairs, to pretend I hadn't heard anything. But I didn't. I couldn't. My hand trembled slightly as I pushed the door open just enough to see inside, and what I saw made my blood run cold. My stepfather stood near his desk, his back to me. The dim light from the lamp cast eerie shadows across the room, distorting everything into something almost unreal. But it was the man sitting across from him who sent a wave of fear crashing through me. A stranger, dressed in dark clothing. He sat with an unsettling ease, his fingers tapping a slow rhythm against the desk. But it was his eyes that disturbed me the most, calculating, watchful, waiting. And my stepfather, he wasn't himself. Tension radiated from his stance. His voice carried an edge I had never heard before. "I told you this isn't what we agreed on," he said, his tone tight. The stranger tilted his head slightly, considering. Plans change. My stepfather's hand curled into a fist at his side. I sucked in a sharp breath, suddenly aware that I was witnessing something I was never meant to see. Something dangerous. I needed to leave. Now. But as I stepped back, the floorboard beneath me creaked. The sound was soft, barely there, but it was enough. The stranger's head snapped up. Our eyes met, and in that instant, I knew there was no undoing this. The room fell deathly silent. A chill shot down my spine as I locked eyes with him. For a split second, no one moved, no one spoke. It was as if time had frozen, as if my presence had sent a ripple through something I was never meant to witness. Then my stepfather turned. His eyes widened, shock flickering across his face before something darker took its place. Something I had never seen in him before. His body stiffened, his jaw clenched, like he was trying to decide what to do next. "What are you doing here?" His voice was sharper than I expected, laced with something that made my stomach twist. I swallowed hard, pulse hammering. I I heard something. I didn't mean to. The stranger smirked, leaning back in his chair. Looks like we have company. My stepfather's expression darkened. He took a slow step toward me, his movements deliberate, controlled. Go back upstairs. The command was quiet, but there was no mistaking the urgency behind it. But I couldn't move. I looked from him to the stranger, feeling the tension crackle between them like a live wire. My stepfather wasn't just annoyed that I was here. He was afraid, and that terrified me more than anything. I shook my head slowly. What's going on? He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. It's none of your concern. Just go. The stranger let out a low chuckle. She's curious. Can you blame her? My stepfather shot him a glare. I took a step back, my heart slamming against my ribs. Who is he? The stranger grinned, his fingers drumming lazily against the desk. She doesn't know. My stepfather ignored him. Go upstairs. Now. His voice was firm, unwavering, but I caught the flicker of unease in his eyes, the way his hand subtly clenched at his side. I looked at the stranger again, at the way he was watching me, studying me. A terrible feeling twisted in my gut. I had just stepped into something far bigger than I could understand. Tell me the truth. My voice was barely above a whisper. For a long moment, my stepfather just looked at me. His expression was unreadable. I hoped he would explain everything, that he would finally make sense of the storm brewing in the air around us. But then, go. No, it wasn't just a command this time. It was a plea. Something inside me twisted. I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to walk away without knowing the truth. But the way he was looking at me, the desperation in his eyes, the silent warning, I knew I had no choice. So I turned. I made my way toward the stairs, my breath shaky, my thoughts tangled. I had barely made it halfway up when I heard it. A single sentence, murmured so low I almost missed it. You should have told her the truth. I stopped. My grip tightened on the banister. But I didn't turn back. I didn't dare. Instead, I kept walking. I reached my room, closing the door softly behind me. My hands trembled at my sides. I stood there for what felt like forever, my mind racing, my body tense. And then, finally, I let out a slow, shaky breath. I didn't know what I had just walked in on. I didn't know who that man was. But I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Not even close.